Okay, we're good. We're live. Good evening, everyone. Happy New Year. This is the City of Fairway. This is our City Council meeting for Monday, January 9th, 2023, 6:30 p.m. I'd like to call this meeting to order. I have one announcement. I need to add one item to the new business part of our agenda, item C, a discussion concerning HOA covenants. All right, if everyone will please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First on the agenda, we have some very special guests here this evening for a couple reasons. I'll save the general or the main purpose for my second part, but today is Law Enforcement Recognition Day. So that's one reason. But more importantly is the chief has some officer recognition tonight that he'd like to share with us. Chief Thurlow?
I'll ask that the officers come up front with me as I'm doing this. Actually, you guys are just going to stay right here. Mayor and Council, thanks for the opportunity to let the city show recognition to these officers. I mentioned it at the last council meeting, an incident that occurred within the city on 11/24. Officers Skimper and Rubio were working as a two-man unit. They stopped a vehicle on Shawnee Mission Parkway in Neosho. At that time, they went up to the car. They quickly noticed there was an open container of alcohol in the car. Investigation continued from that point on. And eventually a passenger was asked to step from the vehicle. As that passenger exited the vehicle, Officer Rubio saw a handgun in that individual's waistband. He ordered him to show his hands, and that individual did not comply. In fact, he went for the weapon at that point. Officer Rubio took control of that individual. A tussle ensued. Officer Skimper, having been there, moved to a position to assist Officer Rubio and take this individual to the ground, still wrestling for the gun. The other two officers, Officer Metz and Officer Oswald, responded immediately to that scene and assisted with taking that individual into custody. There were no serious injuries, and fortunately, no one was killed during that incident. That individual remained combative, even through our processing procedure, and he was evaluated at a hospital and still remained combative. The officers remained completely professional and showed an extreme level of integrity. Because of that, all of these officers are receiving a certificate of exemplary performance from the Fairway Police Department. Their actions bring great credit to themselves, the Fairway Police Department, and the City of Fairway. And they'll each receive that certificate. Thank you.
Gentlemen, before you sit down, thank you. That doesn't seem sufficient, but I hope you all, and this includes Mandy and the chief, how much you're appreciated by all of our residents. And I know I don't know. I can only imagine how tough your job is. This particular recognition, I don't know how to express my feelings. That's unusual, isn't it, Chief? But anyway, thank you for everything that you do for us. And we feel safe because of you. And I hope at any time that if you have questions or anything that we can share with you about the city, please ask. If there's anything that we can do for you, please let the chief know. But we're always open to any time you'd like to talk to any of the governing body. You are very welcome. But thank you very, very much, and you are appreciated. Thank you. Thank you, Chief. All right, moving on to the monthly reports of the standing committees. The Consolidated Fire District Number 2. Chief Steve Chick is not here this evening, so we will let his report stand as submitted to us. Administration and Finance, Nathan.
The notes of the meeting, I'm going to turn this down a little bit before it starts to squeak. The notes of the meeting are included in both the administration and the finance sections of the packet, so I will not touch on those. Suffice it to say that we finished the year very strongly when it comes to our financial position of the city. Sales tax was at a record high for us in several months throughout 2022. Our next Finance and Administration Committee meeting will be on Wednesday, the 25th at 6:30 p.m. here at City Hall. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Nathan? All right, thank you. Please, Chief.
Thanks. I'm just going to give some numbers and a really quick overview of my report. Before I get started, I just want to throw some numbers out. If you're not aware of Casey Moe, Casey Case homicide numbers, both of those numbers add up to over 200 homicides last year. We are fortunate and haven't seen any of that, but violent crime, obviously, as I've been saying, is up. I'd like to point out also our numbers are up, as I have been saying in the past. Things to note are not reflected on the report. We had 572 activities reported in December. Last December, we had 367, a difference of 205. And then our car stops are at 304. Again, these officers are very diligent and active. That is part of our patrol style because we really want individuals coming through Fairway, first of all, our guests to feel safe, to know that the police are out there. And then also, if you're planning on doing something wrong, I want them to know, I want those people to know that the police are out there and they get to see those red and blue lights every time they come through. So that number is actually up 223 from December alone. Again, things to mention within the report are the number of drug arrests that we had. Also, another stolen firearm was recovered as well off of a car stop. That individual had access to that weapon, and in fact, it was located in a purse that individual had in their hands at the time of the stop. Other things to mention is we found a sword, which is fun. We did respond to Ward Parkway Mall on a shooting, along with multiple other agencies. You may have heard about that on the news. It was not an active shooter, but it was in fact a shooting. We responded to that. There was a child endangerment call again in reference to a vehicle failing to yield, and there was a juvenile child located later after we did not continue with a pursuit or anything like that, but that vehicle did crash, and a juvenile was located in that vehicle as well. That's the report in an overview. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the chief?
Not on your report, but in connection with the incident that generated the I don't know if citations, the recognition tonight. Citations are what you give us. We give you recognitions.
Right.
Is it unusual to have 4 officers on duty at one time, or is that pretty standard?
It just worked out that way that evening. Officer Skimper is one of our newer officers, and he was training, getting acclimated to Fairway. He's not a new officer by any means. Obviously, he's got tenure and experience, and those guys were working not only as a field training, but they were working with each other. They'd worked at other agencies together as well, at another agency together as well. So they were operating in kind of a known capacity. So it's unusual that there were that many of our officers there, and everyone acted exactly as they should. I couldn't be more proud.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, Public Works, any questions on the report from Bill? Okay, Parks and Rec, Bryce?
Thanks, Mayor. We finished up our Santa's workshop in December, and now we are tearing that down and getting prepared for the pool season. Actually, we've already started hiring. We had a rehire party this last week in town, actually the same time of the Chiefs game, unintentionally. But so we're trying to hit off 2023 on a good note with the hiring process for this summer. So work continues at the pool right now. When the temperatures get a little higher, then we'll see a little bit more progress there with the painting and the caulking and everything that's going on. I'm happy to answer any questions.
They haven't found anything else.
Yeah. Nope.
Thank you. Great. Good. Any questions for Bryce?
I have a question for Bryce.
Yeah, Jenna?
Bryce, we're very excited for Princess Day at my house. I noticed, well, first of all, how were sign-ups, but also I noticed that I couldn't sign up more than one kiddo. Is that an intentional change?
No, so
go ahead.
you can sign up one more kid. We just don't allow you to add it onto your current one. So you have to register both children, and they have to have both accounts in our system.
Everyone needs their own Fairway number.
Yeah, because we
account.
personalize a lot of things, so we want them to make sure that what their name is or what their nickname is. That's why we do that.
Oh, thank you.
Anyone else? All right. Moving on to the monthly reports of special committees. Tree Board, Nathan?
Report.
All right. Next is public comment on the consent agenda items only. I will read those into the record. Item A, approve minutes of the previous regular city council meeting. Item B, approve claims and appropriations, ordinance number 1776, December 2022. Item C, approve letter of understanding with Johnson County Aging and Human Services for the administration of the Utility Assistance Program. Item D, approve letter of understanding with Johnson County Planning, Housing, and Community Development. I will first open that to public comment for the consent agenda items only. Is there anyone in the audience or on Zoom that would like to comment on those items?
If you are participating via Zoom and would like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand function now.
Anyone, Nathan? No? Okay, I will close this section of the public comment. These items are determined to be routine enough to be acted on in a single motion. However, this does not preclude discussion. If a council member requests, an item may be removed from the consent agenda for further consideration and a separate motion. Council, is there anyone that wants to remove one of these items?
Mayor, I don't want to remove it. I just had a question to confirm the Johnson County Utility Assistance Program. We give $1,000 to that a year?
Yes.
Okay, and then does it get used every year, and do we have more demand or less demand?
I can answer that. We get quarterly statements, and we run a balance in there. So we only contribute the money if our balance gets down to zero. So,
Okay.
and then we'll put in another $1,000.
So right now we have,
There's a couple $100. I think there's probably $400 or $500 in there.
okay,
So, yep.
thank you.
So there's always a balance in there. Yeah. All right, anyone else? I'll entertain a motion then.
I move to approve consent agenda items A through D.
Second.
All right, it was moved by Dan Bailey, and the second was David Watkins. All those in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Passes unanimously. All right, we'll move on to new business. I will call for public comment after each one of these individual items. First of all, item A to be considered, the 2022 and 2023 agreement with the Kansas City Metropolitan Crime Commission. Chief?
This is an annual agreement that we have with the Crime Commission. The cost of it is a little over $1,000 for each year. That goes to support, obviously, metropolitan crime fighting, things like tips and different things that commission supports to include officers throughout the metro.
I would just add the reason we're doing 22 and 23 now is because they sent the 22 contract to the wrong address. So,
Well, actually, Nathan, can I do you
Sure.
mind if I answer that? I apologize for not explaining that. So I got a phone call from one of the guys that run that, and he goes, JP, we messed this up, and do you mind if I send it to you now? And I said that would be okay. And he goes, well, you'll get another one here in about a week. And so I said that would be okay.
My only question is that why it's not on the consent agenda? Because it is, okay, thank you.
normally it would be, but this is, because we're doing the 2-for-1 here, I wanted to just call that attention out.
All right, council, any questions or discussion on this item? I'll open it for public comment. Is there anyone in the audience or on Zoom that would like to comment on this item? Nope. Okay, I'll close that, and I will ask for a motion.
Mayor, I move that we approve both the 2022 and 2023 agreements with the Kansas City Metropolitan Crime Commission.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we approve these both of these agreements. All those in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Passes unanimously. Moving on to item B, consider building permit extension for 5450 Aberdeen. Nathan?
Yeah, I'll be the first to admit that I'm not as up to speed on this as I would normally be, just because it's been a busy week. Well, last week was busy, and this week is starting out the same. But I've heard no concerns from staff about the request.
Okay. Any questions from council? I mean, the packet was pretty explanatory what the issues were.
Normally we have sort of a timeline or what's left to do.
I think that was in there,
Was
wasn't it?
that in there?
Yeah.
I thought it looked like it was past stuff that
think
had,
that
like
was in
the inspection that had happened and failed and then passed.
Are you here to discuss that? Okay, if you would, please come to the podium, state your name and address for the record.
Can you hit the button on there? Can you hit the button down there?
Green means go. My name is Joe Elder, 2705 West 51st Terrace, Westwood, Kansas, regarding 2450 or 5450 Aberdeen. If there's any questions, you just asked a moment ago about an outline and kind of a projected timeline. And if it's all in front of you right there, it puts it in right into May, into June, as far as wrapping up. The painters are in there right now. And from there, everything just kind of falls into place. Electrical, plumbing, HVAC, finish the hardwood. Just imagine wrapping up a home. If you've ever had any home projects you've had work on, I don't know what else I can offer for you. I've been in this community since '97 and have built a lot of homes in the area. First time I've asked for a request like this in front of anyone like you. It's supply chain issues. I use certain people, and I don't just hire anybody. I want it to stand the test of time. So it's taken a bit of time. It's a good-sized project.
The world in which we live has complicated your life, hasn't
Sure,
it?
yeah, I'm sure, as yours as well.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any further discussion, council? All right, we'll open it for public comment. Seeing none, we will close this section, and I'll ask for a motion.
Mayor, I move that we approve the additional 6-month building permit extension that has been requested for 5450 Aberdeen Road.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by David Watkins and seconded by John Allen Smith that we approve the building permit extension for 5450 Aberdeen. All those in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Passes unanimously. All right, and the last item on the new business agenda, discussion, thank you for coming, discussion concerning HOA covenants. This item was added at the last minute, like this afternoon, because Nathan was just notified at the end of last week about a bill that will be introduced in Topeka concerning the restrictive covenants and HOA agreements. This is something that this council talked about, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I've lost track. Jenna, is that about when it was? Yeah, and at that time, Nathan did a lot of research with the county on that issue, but it is being brought forward in Topeka by our representatives. That's just a coincidence, Ethan and Ree. And so it was instigated by Roland Park, correct, Nathan? And so they talked to some of the cities, but not all of the cities, and we were one of the cities that were forgotten. So that's why I'm bringing it up this evening for us to talk about, because they're wanting to know our opinion. Nathan, do you want to add anything to that?
And I would just clarify that I was actually made aware of this at the beginning of last week, returning from vacation. So not the end of last week, but at the beginning. It was in my email when I got back. So today, there is a law that's out there in Kansas that is a mechanism for HOAs to change restrictive languages within their covenants and plats, deeds, all that sort of stuff. There's laws out there that exist today for HOAs to move forward with that process and to be able to refile the documents redacted at the county with no refiling fee. What that law does not contemplate is what happens if an HOA is no longer active? What if it's defunct? And so there was no mechanism, there is currently no mechanism for that. The proposed legislation essentially keeps the original portion intact, essentially, and then there's a new provision that allows for cities to go in if they've determined an HOA is defunct, and the city may, it's not shall, the city may go in and redact, have the plats redacted, have the deed language redacted, covenants, bylaws, declarations of HOAs. The city can have that work done, and in our case, it would be done through our legal. We would contract it out, and then they can go. Then we would go in and refile it with the county. It does not delete the original documents. It only redacts those documents, and it would make the new document the primary source. So when a title search is done, it would pull the new redacted document. The city can only go in and redact, remove the restrictive language regarding ownership and occupancy. We do have an HOA in Fairway, so I've spent quite a bit of time looking at this again and trying to remember essentially what we talked about a long time ago. But for example, the Mission Highlands HOA is the defunct HOA. When you look at the plat for Mission Highlands, that was a neighborhood that was platted all at once, unlike Reinhardt, which was platted in about 6 times, I think. Over the total HOA is a grouping of 6 different plats. In the plat language that I looked at, I just randomly selected some for Reinhardt, trying to get the different plats. But like the Mission Highlands, there is no restrictive language on the plats themselves. So from that perspective, I think we're okay. for those two HOAs. I didn't look at all of them. However, when you look at the restrictive languages, I cannot get my hands on the Mission Highlands covenants. I can get my hands on the deed, on the articles of incorporation or the declaration, essentially. It doesn't make any reference in there to it, to any sort of restrictive covenants. But I can't get the actual covenants. I can't find them, and the county doesn't have them listed on the website for properties within the Mission Highlands HOA. We did go back, this was back when we were doing the research years ago, for Reinhardt. In their covenants, we know that that language does not exist. So from the time that it was incorporated, and there was language in there, over the course of time, that HOA has removed that language. As for the other HOAs in Fairway, I have copies of covenants, but I don't know if they're the most recent. So when the original law was passed, HOAs were given about 30 days to change their bylaws or covenants or plats and get them refiled with the county. I don't know if the HOAs, I don't know how that was communicated to them or if they did that. So one of the things that we were asked in the communication from me by Roland Park was to seek support from the governing body. And so obviously in order to to do that, we need to make sure we have all of our information first, and I'm still gathering that information as far as what sort of impact potentially this could have on Fairway from a financial standpoint, depending on how much work is involved that legal would have to do in terms of going through and searching for our plats, because not unique here to the Northeast, Fairway was completely built out before it was Fairway. So all of the platting that was done before us, and it was approved by the county. So we have a very patchwork of plats that we have in-house. So we would have to go out and explore and try and obtain the rest of those plats from the county, and then we would have to determine, when you look at bylaws, declarations, and covenants of HOAs, we would have to look at those, particularly for Highlands is what the city would have to do, because the law is unchanged in that the city or the county could reach out to active HOAs and request that they make those changes within 30 days too. Now, I don't know the extent of what exactly would need to be filed. For example, the plats, if we were talking about Reinhardt, it's 6 different plats. Mission Highlands is 1. I'm guessing probably Fairway and Fieldston's probably a couple. Fairway is probably a couple. So those would need to be found and then determined if the language exists in either the deeds or the plats or in the HOA documents. So, and like I said, the county doesn't even have on file the Mission Highlands covenants. Now, I don't know if they were provided to you guys when you purchased. Well, you're not in there, but you should have received a copy when you purchased your home, probably. I don't know. So there will just be a lot of research going to that, and then in the end, I'm still trying to get the answer of, for example, like with the HOA documents, can we just hand the county one redacted set and then they apply that to all of the homes, or do we have to submit 400 and some odd individual documents for each property in Mission Highlands if the city were to choose to go down that road? Obviously, submitting one document versus over 400 is much different in terms of how much work our attorneys are going to put into it to get that ready. So hopefully we can get some of that clarified fairly quickly, because as I told both Roland Park and the 2 legislators, I think generally the city would be supportive of it, although we hadn't had the discussion. It just depends on, from an economic standpoint, what's the impact to the city. So those are things that we're still working on, but the mayor and I wanted to bring it to your attention tonight to know that this is something that's in the works. We understand it's been pre-filed in the House, but I don't know that it's been pre-filed in the Senate.
No,
correct?
it hasn't.
So again, generally not something that I don't think we want to be opposed to, but we just need to figure out the impacts. And while it does say the city's may, I think we need to be certain on, if this legislation were to be enacted, is there going to be some sort of, I'll say, public interest in really pushing the city to get this accomplished? And if so, we need to know what the expense is going to be to the city, and if we're going to have to plan for this. I think in one of my communications, I said if this is something that we can work out in our existing budget for legal services, and I think we'd be supportive of it. But we just need to know how much it's going to cost.
It's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that there is an existing law that makes those restrictions moot?
Correct. They're not enforceable.
They're not enforceable. Okay, so they're not enforceable. So the fact that they exist, and if they aren't redacted, they aren't enforceable anyway.
Correct.
Okay, because I think that's an important point. We're protected there, and the residents are protected.
Well, I think it's important. I think we need to be careful with this because as the city, we were not involved in this from the beginning.
That was going to, and my next point was going to be, the HOA is with private citizens. It's not, the city is not involved in the HOAs. And so if we are now and we aren't then, I mean, it's taken us a long time, and I mean, however long I've been on council, for the cities to understand that the HOAs are independent entities and that the city is not involved. Because you get questions all the time. I got questions as a council person, the council needs to help us with this. No, because that's private. So this is not my opinion. I'm just stating this is another issue that we have to be careful how we do this. And the third issue is the financial issue.
Yeah, each of the HOAs were already HOAs before Fairway annexed those parts of the city into our boundaries. So I think the Mission Highlands HOA goes back to like 1930. So that's when the first tracts of land, for sure. And then that's, I think, when it was platted, the HOA, I think, was 1937. So it predated us by 12 years as a city.
We're not being asked to decide anything tonight, are we? Because we don't even.
I don't. Yeah,
I don't even know if any of the HOAs have a problematic covenant or restriction.
So generally, we wouldn't even be discussing this yet until I had all the answers to give to you. But so I'm not asking for the council to do anything tonight. If the council wanted to take the step of issuing some sort of public support, which would likely be via a resolution, I would suggest the earliest that would occur would be in February.
And the reason we wanted to start the discussion tonight was to make you all aware of it, because one bill has already been pre-filed, the one in the House, the one in the Senate has not. And conversations have taken place with some of the other cities. Roland Park reached out to some of the other cities, and some of them that didn't. So we're a little behind the game here, no fault of our own. So we wanted to get it in front of you tonight and know that it will be a discussion that we'll be having in the future. Yes, go ahead, John Allen.
Just one question that'll be helpful, I think, for February is, what are we trying to solve, right? If it's a defunct organization that wasn't enforceable in the first place.
What we're trying to solve here is Roland Park has reached out and asked for our support.
Right. What are they trying to solve? If these are defunct organizations that
No.
are not enforceable anyway.
I can speak to this,
Yeah.
I think. So I think the idea is there's hateful language that was created years ago, right? That says you couldn't buy a home on the basis of your race, on the basis of your religion. And so the idea.
Your mic is not on. Yeah,
Can you hear me?
want to erase those from the documents. It's not a legal problem because it's already been determined. It's not a legal problem.
It's not a legal problem. It's like a human kind of dignity problem, is how I would characterize it.
Yeah, and that's your opinion.
How
Right.
I would characterize it.
Right, as you would characterize it.
Okay.
So
I
we're
understand.
not trying to resolve that issue.
Right.
We legally, we're fine, and that's why it reads may.
Right. So then it's at what cost?
At what
If
cost?
they're- Right.
I
Right.
think that's like, from my perspective, it's like putting a price tag on fixing something that we all now agree is shouldn't have been the case, right? We shouldn't have said you can't buy this house because of your race.
Oh, and I totally agree. I just think we already solved it.
Yeah.
They're defunct.
Right.
And the Supreme Court invalidated them. So-
Exactly.
But
And
I'd love to have more
that's the
discussion
issue.
because I do think they're horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
and I think, John, I don't think it's a distinction of defunct or not defunct. Those restrictive covenants have been invalidated for a long time. The only factor of defunct HOA comes into it is that there is no HOA to act if they happen to have an offending restrictive covenant still in that document that hasn't been expunged. There's no entity to act to remove it. For any active HOA that has that problem, it's up to them to remove it, and no city would get involved there. So it's really just, if Highlands, Mission Highlands is our only inactive HOA, that would be the only one that we would really have to look into in detail.
You have to consider that we're using taxpayer dollars for a private entity.
Right. That doesn't have any function at this point.
Correct.
Right.
Well, I think that it's important to be conscious of the cost that we're spending with taxpayer dollars. I 100% agree with that.
And that's my point.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with that. Separate and apart from that, I think it is something that it's a good thing for us to go out and talk to residents about and see what they care about. I think it would be painful for somebody to buy a home and see the deed and say, for example, you couldn't have this home because you were Jewish. It is still there and still present, so even if it's not enforceable, it could still be painful and offensive. And since we all agree that it shouldn't have been there today, I think it's worth seeing if we could make it work within our budget.
And that'll be part of further discussion down the road.
I would just add, as when it comes to the deeds specifically, the ones that I've looked at today, I couldn't find the language in any of them. And as homes have been sold over the years, that language has been removed from deeds during the course of the sale. So, it could be something that, I guess, and that's my other question from the city perspective, is we do have some homes that are not within an HOA, and so we would need to look at the deeds of the homes not within the HOA to see if those would need to be removed, that language would need to be removed as well. So again, I think, I definitely understand from a philosophical point, the benefits of moving through this process. It's just a matter of, at the end of the day, if we're talking about a significant legal expense, I think that's something that as the governing body, you need to decide to do. That becomes a policy decision on how we spend taxpayer dollars, because that's not something, this type of an issue is certainly a one-off from the normal business of the city. So I think it's important that we start this discussion. I would have loved to have had more information so it could be a more thorough discussion tonight, but I would say as we look to, we may be able to put this on the agenda for the Administration and Finance Committee meeting at the end of the month. I can hopefully have some more answers, and then if the decision is to move forward with some sort of indication of support, I can have something for consideration at the February City Council.
Well, if you need an indication of support, we already have a non-discrimination resolution and a non-discrimination ordinance on our books.
Sure.
And those are certainly consistent with and support the concept that those already vacated covenants
Right.
are offensive to
Right. And thank
the
you,
residents of Fairway.
David,
So,
that's a very good point.
yeah, so I
just add
Sure, go
one
ahead.
other thing that, as we're considering this too, I think one thing we could do to the bill is to provide state funds for our legal expenses by, that could be a consideration that we would support the bill if there were funds available for the state.
Sure.
For us to tap into so that it didn't affect our city budget, since it's potentially not really a city issue either.
Right.
It's broader than that, right? It's bigger than our city.
And again, the legal expenses could be minimal, but I spoke with Anna for our zoning council, and she just felt like there needed to be more information and clarity in the bill, which is what we started working on over the weekend with the representatives, just to try and figure out exactly what the process is. And I do have a call into the recorder at Johnson County as well to see if they can provide some input, because if it's specifically for Mission Highlands, if it's us providing them one document saying, here, apply this to all, that's easy, because I can already tell, because there was a nice single one plat, there's no language in there. I didn't look at any deeds for that area, but I would assume if it's not in the deed or if it's not in the plat, it's probably not going to be in the deed. So it's just, we just need to figure out how, I don't want to make this sound simplistic and bad, but we need to figure out how much work it's going to be for legal to do. And if it's something that is going to be, if we're, again, from a city expense standpoint, we would only be talking about Highlands. If the other HOAs were to go through this process, they would have to figure out how to cover their own expenses. So we really just need to figure out, if we are having to have Stinson prepare 450 copies of something versus one, what's that going to cost?
Well, the concern that I'm now hearing even more is not only the cost of legal, but also time, your time. We have 1,600 some houses in Fairway.
1,800.
1,800. All right, so I was short 200. I don't think it's practical for us to do a title search for 1,800 houses. That's impractical. So let's be careful how far down this we go at this stage. I would focus, if you're going to focus any time, spend any time, focus on the defunct Mission Highlands.
Yeah, it would only be that HOA, yeah. and then I think we
wouldn't go through all 400 houses there. That's not.
No, well, no. The only concern would be is what do we have to prepare to submit to the county? So, like with the replat in Mission Highlands, it's one, but we don't have to worry about that because it's not in the language. So we really just need to focus on looking at a couple of the deeds to make sure that there's nothing. Because now on plats, it references that on the plat it'll reference HOA covenants or something, but it doesn't get specific about what they are, just essentially refers them to the other document. So I think we just need to spot check a few deeds in Mission Highlands, and then we would need to see what the county is going to expect from us, because I can tell you, we can come up with an answer real quick if we find out from the county that we have to submit one copy versus 400 and some. And if it's one copy, that's not significant work. If it's 400 copies and it's the covenants and it's the bylaws, then we need to just figure out the time in that involved. And again, cities, I would envision this will be more, the attorneys would pick up most of the weight on this, because we don't have the expertise to, you guys, you all redact stuff all the time.
The paralegals redact, which are cheaper than the attorneys, to be clear. We don't spend our time redacting.
Yeah.
All right.
So more to come.
Yeah, more to come. All right. I'll open this discussion for public comment. Not yet. This item. We're still on new business. Nope. Okay. We'll close that portion of public comment. Moving on to item 9, the governing body comment. During this time, members of the governing body will be given the opportunity to speak about matters related to the city. No formal action will be taken during this time. Does anyone have an item?
Bill's not on Zoom, right?
Correct. You can still say it. It's public record. He'll see it.
9 bags of sticker balls out of my yard in the last 2 weeks, saving the sewers. You're welcome.
We call them spiky balls in our neighborhood.
Sticker balls.
Sticker balls, okay. All right, we'll close the governing body comment section. Now's your time. We'll open the public comment for items not listed on the agenda. If you'll please state your name and address for the record.
Jim Hafner, 6242 Glenfield Drive. 2 quickies on housing. Is there a guideline for how big a house can be rebuilt after one's torn down?
Yes.
Who do I talk to about that?
Ultimately, it'd be the Planning Commission, but staff can help you.
Yeah, if you reach out to City Hall tomorrow and you can speak to Kim or Basil, just ask to speak to someone about redevelopment.
Okay. Second question is along the same line. I heard at a different meeting that Fairway's mill tax has never been changed. It's the only city still in Johnson County that hasn't lowered it over years. Is that true?
No. It's not true that it's never been changed.
Well, how about lowered?
Well, not in the time I've been on council. Does staff know?
I can't tell you. I'd have to look up to see when we lowered it last.
I've been on council since 2009, and it's not been lowered that I remember. I could be wrong.
Well, my concern is, the landscape is changing with all the little cheapy houses going into the big multi-million-dollar ones. So wouldn't that affect your budget in a positive way so you could kind of lower it for us? Not quite so.
Well, unfortunately, costs continue to increase. I mean, the streets are the same. I mean, I know we're taking more tax dollars in on the larger homes, but our costs continue to go up. Medical costs go up, salaries go up. I mean, our whole budget continues to increase.
For what, you guys?
No, we're not. No,
Okay.
we're volunteers.
Okay.
Almost.
Yeah. I mean, each council person gets $150 a month. I'm paid $300 a month, and I can tell you it doesn't even cover my expenses. We are volunteers.
Right.
And we're happy to do this.
Okay.
But every year, attend our budget meetings, but we begin our budget each year what I call ground zero. We build it from zero for what are the services that our residents want, what are those services going to cost. And then we look at the valuation of the properties. In fact, our meeting for 2023 with Nathan and I going with the county appraiser is set for March 2nd. And we will be looking at what that value is compared to what the services are that the residents want.
But haven't you been seeing valuations going up? I mean, there's just 3 houses I know just a block away that are down. And
Valuations have been going up over the last few years, significantly.
Quite a few more. Okay.
Yeah, and we had a good, David Watkins, I'm one of your board reps. We had a good discussion about this a couple of council meetings ago. I think that Keith hiding behind the mask back there. Keith had similar questions. And an example that we talked about, as you know, Glenfield, Jer Street, and Howe are repaved this year. We have, I don't know how many, 2 other streets repaved. We wanted to repave 7, but the bid to repave all of the streets that we planned to repave came in 50% higher than our budget. If we were going to spend $500,000, the bid came in at $750. If it was $600, so we actually had to take streets out that we wanted to repave this year and move them last year. We're into a new year now, into 2023, and we're hoping that the cost goes down. So the dynamic that the mayor is pointing out is, yes, our property values in general have been going up, but the expenses that the city incurs just to maintain the status quo have been going up similarly. And so we haven't generated a huge excess, so to speak. But we do every year in our budgeting process, starting from zero, we do look at the mill levy and we ask the question, can it be lowered, or can it stay the same, or do we have to increase it? And fortunately, for the last few years, we haven't had to increase it because of the property tax, the property valuation increases. So we haven't had to increase the rate because the underlying values have gone up, and that's helped us keep up with inflation from the city expense perspective.
Just as a point of reference, I think I'd asked about the sewer that was in front of my house, which was crappy for about the last 10 years. You just finally got around to it. Thank you. The other quick question is, Houlihan's has been vacant for 2 years or more. What's the deal with that?
Oh, boy. You've just hit a hot
leave
button
now?
with myself. I am very upset. I can say staff is too, Nathan, with the leasing agent, which is Block, on that building. That restaurant closed in December of 2019, so it's been 3 years. And they know we're not happy. The problem is, I won't call it a problem, but one of the issues is that is a privately owned building. It is not part of the Fairway Shops. The Fairway shops are owned by First Washington. The city does not own those. But Fairway is owned by private investors. There's a number of them.
The Houlihan's is owned by private.
Houlihan's, what did I say?
Fairway.
I'm sorry. Houlihan's.
Fairway itself is owned by
You're supposed to-
1,800 private investors.
Houlihan's is owned by a group of private investors. And for whatever reason, they seem to be content for it to be empty. And they know we are not happy. Now, we've been meeting with them. We both sent them a not very nice email. Nathan sent one and I sent one. And they finally meted with us. And they've told us 3 different entities that were interested, that submitted plans to them, but all 3 deals fell through before it even got to the city. Now, we've met with them and told them what we're interested in, what we'd like the property to be, because Houlihan's was very popular, and we'd like to have a similar entity lease that. But we're trying. We are trying.
That's our mission, Mall, yeah, okay.
Oh, hey, it's a lot better than the Mission Mall. Let me tell you. Yeah, you're welcome. Anyone else for public comment? Okay, we'll close that. We are going to move into executive session for attorney-client privilege communications. Is there a motion?
Mayor, I move that City Council recess into executive session to obtain legal advice related to the Shawnee Indian Mission pursuant to attorney-client consultation exception, KSA 75-4319B2. The executive session will include Attorney Rich Cook and City Administrator Nathan Nogelmeyer. The open meeting will resume in the City Council chamber at 8.
Let's go 8:30.
At 8:30.
1 hour, let's just round it to 8:30. Sorry, Tanya. We do not intend to have any further business at the end of the executive session. We will immediately adjourn.
We do need a second.
I haven't.
Okay.
I'm not moving too fast, I guess, tonight. Is there a second? All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, aye. Opposed? Okay.